Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey, and in this video we're going to expand upon our 10-minute game and make it into a simple RTS. Let's begin. So on the 10-minute challenge, I took a different approach from most people. Instead of making something from scratch, I used that video to highlight the power of writing clean, reusable code. Because of that, we managed to make a pretty nice complex scene in just those 10 minutes. Essentially, we made the base for a tiny RTS game. We can spawn warriors and they move towards each other and attack their enemies. Now we're going to expand upon it by adding some workers to gather resources and then manually spawning all of our warriors. We had an entire series on making the Gather AI, and here we're going to do something similar. Over here I have a gold node sprite. This will be our main resource. So let me drag it onto my scene, and I want to make it into a prefab. Call it PF resource node gold. I'm going to place a bunch of them around here. Okay. Now I'm going to drag a crate, which will be our storage, and a tent, which will represent our barracks from where we're going to spawn our warriors. Okay, so this is the scene we're going to make. We're going to spawn workers from our storage. They are going to mine gold from one of these nodes and drop it back into storage. That will give us gold onto a global game resource pool. And then we're going to use those resources to spawn a warrior from the barracks, and then the warrior will move ahead and there will be some enemies walking around the position around here. Now in this video I'm going to quickly write the code and do a little overview, so if you want a more in-depth explanation of what I'm going to do, check out the Gather AI series playlist. So let's begin by making a resource node class. So in U C# script, this is our resource node, which will be our class that represents a single one of these resource nodes. So in here, let's make it a very simple class, and we're going to have a constructor for the resource node, and we're going to receive a transform for our transform, and a public vector3 for our get position, which will return our transform.position. We could also place this as a component on the transform itself, but this way we keep our code nice and separated. This class will later be more complex, but for now all we want is to create this class so we're not dealing directly with the transforms. Okay, so with the base for our resource node, now let's make the worker. We're going to do the same thing we did for the warrior, so let's duplicate the base position movement handler class. Again, this is one of my base class that was written months ago and lets me easily set up a character to move into a position. So in here, let's make a function that will receive the node that he's supposed to mine. So make a public void set resource node, and I'm going to receive the resource node that he's meant to mine. I'm going to store it as an internal variable. Now let's also do some basic states like we did for the warrior, so a private enum for our possible states. And for the worker, he can be idle or moving to resource node, gathering resources, and moving to storage. Private state, and by default we start off at idle. State equals state.idle. Okay, so on our update, let's do a switch on our state. Case we are on state.idle. Then in here we're going to ask the game handler to give us a resource node. So go into the game handler and get a resource node. We're going to make that function later, and it will eventually return a resource node. We're only going to do this if our current resource node is equal to null. So this is our found resource node, and then if found resource node is not null, we're going to set our resource node to be the found resource node. Okay. And finally, if the resource node, if it is not null, then we have a resource node. So let's set the state to state.moving to resource node. Okay, so then on the case state.moving to resource node, in here let's handle our movement. And we're going to test if the vector3.distance, if the distance between this worker and the resource node.get position, if the distance between the two is close, so let's say within 5 units, then here we are close enough to actually start gathering. So let's set the state to state.gathering resources. If it is not, then we are too far, so set the target position to be on the resource node dot get position. Okay, so then on the case state dot gathering resources, when gathering resources, let's play the mining animation. And And when we finish playing the animation, let's set the state to state.moving to the storage. And here we're going to get the storage transform, which we're going to ask the game handler. Get storage transform. Then we check for the distance to our storage transform. And if we are close enough, then finally drop the resources and go back to idle. So state equals state.idle. Okay, so now we need to go into the game handler and do these functions. So back in the game handler, let's go down here, make a public static. This one is going to return a resource node. I'm going to receive a vector3 for the position. So up here, we need to add some serialized fields. One for the storage transform, another one for the barracks transform, and an array for the gold node transform array. Then we're going to use the gold node transform array to create resource nodes. So let's make a list of resource node, which is the resource node list, and we're going to make this list in here on our start. Okay, so we are cycling through the array and creating new resource node objects using each transform in the array. So now we can go down here, and later we're going to make it to return the closest, but for now let's just return a random one. Okay, so we're returning a random resource node. Now the other function we need to make is to get the storage transform. And we're simply going to return the instance.storage transform. Okay, so everything should be set for a very simple gatherer. So let's just go up here and comment out the spawning of the units and set a spawn a worker. For the worker, we're going to have another prefab. So for the PF worker, and let's instantiate them in here. There's the worker, he goes to the node, he mines it, and he goes to storage and back to the node, back to mining it, and so on. Okay, great. So now that we have the worker, let's make a game resources class to keep track of the total amount. So let's make a new C# script, call it game resources. And here again, a very simple class. So let's make a private static int for the gold amount, then a function, public static void add gold amount. We're going to have an int for the add amount and gold amount plus equals, yep. Then a function to try to spend, so public static bool try spend gold amount. So this will only actually spend the gold amount if we can. So first we test if the gold amount is bigger than the amount. If it is, then we reduce the gold amount by the amount and return true. If not, then we return false. Okay, so just for testing, let's add a pop-up in here. So for that, I'm going to use the CodeMonkey utilities, which as always you can grab for free from unitycodemonkey.com. So in here, just for testing, go into cmdebug and do a text pop-up to say how much gold we currently have. Okay, so we can now go into our worker. And down here, when you drop it off at storage, let's do game resources.add gold amount, and we're going to add 1 gold. Okay, so let's see if we see a pop-up saying 1 when the unit reaches the storage. There he goes, he's mining, now he goes back to storage, and yep, there's the pop-up, we have 1 gold. Now he goes, mines another one, goes, and we got 2. Okay, good. Now let's make a UI to display the gold amount instead of using a debug pop-up. So I'm going to go into the UI, canvas, and here create a new empty game object, and we're going to call it the resources window. In this window, I'm going to put it on the upper left corner and add another empty game object for the gold amount text, and it will simply have a text and it will say gold and then a certain amount. Okay, now let's make the script to control it. So a new C# script. This will be the resources window. In here on our private void awake, let's grab a reference to the text component. So a private text, which is part of the Unity engine.ui. And on our private void update, let's update the text. Okay, so we should now be seeing the gold correctly displayed on the corner of our screen. Okay, there's the gold saying 0, now it drops it, now it says 1. Okay, great, so we now have a counter to correctly display the gold that we are currently carrying. So now let's make some UI buttons to spawn workers and warriors. So let's make another empty game object, call it the unit construction window. And here I'm going to place some buttons to construct them. Okay, so here are some very simple buttons with a gold cost. Now let's make the class to handle unit construction. So here is the unit construction system class. We're going to first have a constructor, and on this constructor we're going to receive all the prefabs that we need to construct. Now we're going to have a build queue, so let's make a private int for the warrior queue count. In order to do the construction, I'm going to use the time tick system, which you can check out the full video on. So I'm going to need a private constant for the warrior construction tick max. Let's say in 30 ticks. So on the game handler, I'm going to initialize the time tick system. And now in here, I can subscribe to it. TimeTickSystem.onTick and subscribe to that event. Okay, now on the ticks, if the warrior queue count, if it is bigger than 0, then we have a warrior in the queue, so let's construct them. If the tick is complete, then let's construct them. Okay, now let's have some functions to help us. We're going to make a progress bar, so for that we need a public float for the get warrior construction progress normalized. This will tell us the progress of our current warrior. Then some more helper functions. Okay, so we have some nice helper functions to tell us how many are in the queue if we are currently constructing, and in order to add another one to the queue. So now let's deal with the UI. So here is the unit construction window. Now in here on our awake, let's grab a reference to our button, so a transform for the build warrior button. And when I click on the button, I want to add a warrior to the queue. So I'm going to have a private for the unit construction system. And that's what I'm going to use to trigger that function, unit construction system dot add a warrior to the queue. Now we need a way to set the unit construction system, so let's add it in here. And finally, let's add a progress bar to our construction. So for that, I'm going to use the UI bar from the utilities. And I'm going to update the bar on our update. Okay, so we should be able to construct and see the progress of the warrior construction. So let's see. Okay, so here we are. Now if I click on the warrior button, yep, there you go. He is spawning and the bar is increasing. When it gets to the end, yep, the bar vanishes and the warrior is spawned. Okay, so now let's actually make it spend the gold in order to use it, and let's make it so that we can also build some workers. So let's duplicate all of this also for the worker. So now on the unit construction system, let's also add all of this for the worker. Okay, so we now have functions for the warrior and the worker. So finally, let's actually spend some gold in order to construct them. So in here, before we add these, let's define an int for the warrior cost. And let's say it's 2. So in here, all we need to do is go into the game resources and try to spend the gold amount for the warrior cost. And if we can spend this, then we do add them to the queue. And if not, then we simply do a pop-up. So again, use the CM debug to do a pop-up saying I cannot afford cost. And do the same thing for the worker. Okay, let's see it all in action. Okay, I have 0 gold, so nope, I cannot afford any of them. So let him finish that one, and now let me spawn a warrior, and yep, there's the bar, and as you can see, the gold was spent. I'm back to 0, back to 1. And the warrior, and yep, there he is. Now I have 5 gold, so let me spawn a worker. There's the bar increasing, and he's constructing the worker, and after a while, yep, there you go, a new worker was spawned, and he's straight to work. And there you go, now we have 2 workers gathering goods, and again, I got more for another worker, and now he's gonna get there, and now I have more for another warrior, and so on. Okay, so our basic RTS system is working. Now what we really need, obviously, is some enemies, which is exactly what we did on the previous video. So let's just apply that and everything should be functional. So on our start, let's add some enemies on the right side. So let's define a vector 3 for the enemy center spawn position. So over here in the editor, let me see a random point up here on the right side. So about that seems okay. So that's on, let's say, 270. So in here, I'm going to spawn them on 270, and I'm going to spawn 10 of them. Okay, so I'm now spawning 10 enemies around this point. So now let's just change something on the warrior code. In here on our closest function, we are checking for the closest to this specific position. Now we want to add a float to filter the values to only within a certain max distance. So let's set a float for the max distance. So in here we're simply going to do a test for the vector3.distance, the distance between the position and this warrior.getPosition. If that distance is further than the max distance, then we're going to ignore him. Now by doing this, we can go into our getClosest, and when it comes to our max distance, if we are an enemy, then we're going to only look for close by opponents. So let's search for a maximum distance of, let's say, 40F. If we are not an enemy, so if we are friendly, then let's look at pretty much an infinite distance. Okay, so this way our warriors will always find the enemies, but the enemies won't stick around that area until an opponent comes nearby. Okay, let's test. Okay, so here in my scene, if I pan the camera to the right side, you can see, yep, there's a bunch of enemies right there. So let's go back. And let's spawn a warrior. So there he goes, he's currently being spawned. And when he gets to the end and the prefab is instantiated, yep, and he immediately finds an enemy, goes towards it, and those stand by until he gets within position, then they start fighting. So he won, now he goes for another one, and now he dies. Okay, so let's increase the target distance of the enemies a little bit, and then everything should be working. Okay, so here we are gathering some gold. Let's spawn a warrior, and there he goes. He's being spawned. He's gonna appear right in here. Yep, he's gonna search for an enemy. He's gonna head for this one since it's the closest. Once he gets here, yep, both of them went for him, and he's obviously gonna die. Okay. Now we can go back up here, and let's create some workers so we can spawn warriors faster. So let's make a bunch of workers. There's a second worker. Both of them are mining, gathering resources. Okay, we now have 4 workers gathering resources, so our resources are increasing quite quickly. So now we can spawn a bunch of warriors. And as you can see, I can add them to the queue, and when one ends, another one starts right away. And there you go, there's the other one, and he goes, and he's fighting, and actually there are 2 enemies in there, so they are fighting. And there you go, one of them died, another one died, and there they go. And now here are all my guys being spawned, and now they are attacking them, and they're going one by one. So there you have it, we expanded upon the 10-minute game by adding some workers, resources, and spawning of warriors and workers. In the next video, we're going to construct buildings, give orders to units, and make the enemy warriors roam around. As always, you can download the project files and utilities from unitycodemonkey.com. If you have any questions, post them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time.